everyone, and welcome to today's episode. We're going to be talking about Into the Fire by Irene Hannon. So, this one is a romantic suspense novel and it fits within the Christian fiction category. And it's also book one in Irene's Undaunted Courage series. So, why did I want to read this one? Well, I've enjoyed reading Irene's contemporary romances and romantic suspense books now for many years, and my library has ordered in this entire series. So, my plan is to read the series in 2026. So, let's talk about the book. Into the Fire by Irene Hannon is set in St. Louis. And this one I would say is 50-50 in terms of how the romance and suspense splits in the story. It's pretty even. And there are quite a few romance and suspense tropes. So we've got law enforcement characters. So our leading lady is an arson investigator, and our hero is a special agent. So he's a Fed. We also have forced proximity because our main characters have to work together in the story. It's a lovely friends to more romance, which I really enjoyed. We have a villain who's an arsonist, and we also have a number of intriguing mysteries, and there's quite a few puzzles to solve in this story, which I really enjoyed. So the first line in the book is this one: Fire was cleansing, sacrificial almost. So this comes from the prologue, and as you've probably guessed, it's the villain whose viewpoint we're in the prologue. And basically, at this point in time, we learn they're an arsonist from what's actually going on in the prologue. So let's move forward, and this takes us into chapter one, and I'll introduce Bree. So she's our leading lady, and she is a arson investigator, and she works for the St. Louis Regional Bomb and Arson Unit. Now, she was previously a smoke jumper, and she worked in Idaho and has a firefighting background, but she was injured in a parachuting accident, and because of that, she had to stop smoke jumping, and that's one of the reasons she returned to St. Louis, where her family was, where she was born and raised. So that's where her family is. So, at the start of the story, chapter one, we're moving 5 months into the future after the prologue. And Bree's at a house fire. So, being an arson investigator, she's been sent in to see what's going on with this fire. Will it be ruled an accident or will it be ruled an act of arson? And at first glance, it looks accidental, but one of the questions that comes up from the very beginning relates to who the victim is. So, the victim of this particular house fire is a former arson investigator who worked in the department where Bree works. And that was before her time. So, she hasn't only been back for a few months, and he's retired since she's come back. But the kicker with this is that this former retired arson investigator had actually arranged a meeting with Bree for the following day. And of course, that meeting can't happen because he's perished in the fire, which brings us to a whole lot of questions as to why did he want to meet Bree? What information did he have? And that kicks us off with one of the mysteries in the story. And this introduces us then to Mark. So he's a Fed, he's an ATF special agent, and he was based in Chicago for a decade doing work there. But his grandmother, who raised him, lives in St. Louis. And so he's asked for a transfer back to St. Louis, which is kind of like a career demotion. But the reason he's asked for this transfer is his grandmother is undergoing cancer treatment and needs his help and support. So he wanted to be there to help his grandmother. So the meet cute in this one is a bit strained. They basically meet at the fire scene, and she's very suspicious of him. Bree's sort of thinking, what's he doing here? What does he want? And she's slow to trust, which is part of her character, and that goes back to her history. But at the same time, there are sparks flying, and both of them want to ignore the fact that there's this attraction that starts from the get-go and when they first meet, because neither of them are looking for a romantic relationship for different reasons. So we have a lot of problems in this story. Mark's grandmother obviously has cancer, and that is a part of the story. And he has an unresolved mystery. So his parents passed away when he was younger, and the circumstances behind how that happened are unresolved. And it's something he's been looking into since he's been a special agent. He's wanted to work out exactly what happened to his parents and why did it happen. And I'm not going to say any more because I don't want to give away any spoilers. And Bree, she's had some pretty bad stuff happen, and there's been some problems back in Idaho when she was smoke jumping and working there. And so she's actually one of the reasons she moved home wasn't just the injuries, but because of some things that had happened there. There were some difficult situations. So when bad things start happening to her in the story, they could be a coincidence, but she and her brother, who's in law enforcement as well, he's a policeman. They're not convinced that what's going on is coincidental and what's happening to her could relate to what's going on in the story. And so she could be in danger. So we have unknown danger in the story and it sort of lurks in the background. It's always there. And Bree's just not quite sure what's going on. And Mark's not sure why Bree might be getting targeted as well. So we have multiple mysteries that kind of link up. I really appreciated the puzzles and mysteries in the story. They were very well done. And so the big question is Bree's life in danger? Is she going to meet the fate of the former arson investigator who was murdered, which is where they land with this, as you've probably guessed, and what's actually going on and how can they solve this arson issue? And since they both are in law enforcement, they both have enemies from the past, and that all has to get explored and investigated as well. So I really love this story. It was such a fun read. I read it really quickly because I couldn't put it down. So within 2 days, I'd read this book. And the mysteries were very complex puzzles, and the suspense plot just kept me guessing. Like I didn't pick what was going on, and I'm like, that makes sense. But it was very well written, and it kept me guessing, and I really appreciated that with all the plot twists. And I loved the romance. It was a really sweet friends to more romance, and both of our main characters had emotional baggage to deal with. They both had complex backgrounds and stuff that they had to work through in the story before they could consider being in a romantic relationship with anybody. And we also had a cast of side characters that were quite quirky and interesting, and you knew they were important because they were in the story, but you didn't quite know why they were important. And so I really liked seeing how the side characters played a role in the story. And the villain was a very complex villain. I really appreciated the complexities that went around what was going on with them. And so we'd hear from the villain in their point of view as well, which really added to the danger and suspense in the story, which I really liked. And the story was fast paced, especially towards the end as the danger ramps up and everything comes to the climax that you get in romantic suspense. And I love the very exciting and satisfying story ending as well. So, my favorite book quote in the story is this one. Maybe we can work on learning to forgive together. So, this is Mark and Bree who are talking, and they both are dealing with forgiveness issues in the story. And so, I describe this one as having relevant faith elements because it does touch on forgiveness issues and themes. And we also have trust issues that get explored as well in the story. So, in terms of the impact on me, I was very worried about the characters because of the danger and everything that was going on and all the action and stuff that was happening. And as I said, I read the book very quickly because there was danger that was lurking in the background. And I really liked the multiple point of views because that really did add to my turning the page and turning the page to find out what happens next because we kept getting all little pieces of the puzzle that kept getting revealed. And I was completely intrigued and loved trying to work out what was actually going on. So, in summary, I would recommend Into the Fire to readers who like fast paced romantic suspense, who like law enforcement characters, and especially arson investigators, who like sweet romance that is friends to more in terms of how it plays out, to readers who like their romantic suspense with forced proximity with the main characters working together, and readers who like relevant faith elements that include trust and forgiveness themes that are very organic and naturally come out of what's going on in the story and the characters' backgrounds. Thanks for joining me today. Does Into the Fire sound like a book that you'd like to read? Have you read it? What did you think? You can let me know. If you're listening on the podcast, you can send me a text via a link in the show notes. If you're watching at YouTube, you can like the episode at YouTube and also leave a comment at YouTube. And you can also email me at my website where I have a contact form, and you'll find that at narelleatkins.com. And also, if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. And you can do that at your favorite podcasting app, or you can subscribe at YouTube, and then you'll get a notification of when my next episode drops. And also, if you've enjoyed this episode, please share the link with a friend, especially a friend who likes reading romantic suspense and a friend who you think would like reading Irene's books. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.